Hi, I'm John Spillane, and today on Splash Source U.S. History, we're going to be talking about the Intolerable Acts and how they affected the United States colonies.
Mr. Spillane, isn't that some evidence you used on your LEQ, on your A-push test?
Oh, why yes, John Bean. This is probably the most used evidence that I used on my LEQ until I realized that I probably should have done question 2. So just sit back, relax, and enjoy the show. Take some notes whether you like it or not. I'm talking to you, Haley.
Everywhere you look, there's a heart, a hand to hold on to. Everywhere you look, there's a look of somebody who needs you. When you're lost out.
So starting things off here, Britain and the colonies may have won the 7 Years' War, but this did not stop the war from having consequences. The Treaty of Paris ended the war, but it also stated that the colonists could not intrude on native lands. In addition, wars are not cheap, so the burden eventually fell on the colonists. Now, taxes weren't really a new idea to the... Oh, guys, I gotta go to the bathroom.
Hi, I'm John Lee, and I'll be filling in for John Spleen. Now, taxes weren't a new idea to the colonists. However, those taxes were to regulate trade, while these new taxes were to pay back Britain's war debt. Now, the colonies were used to Britain practicing salutary neglect, but when they broke that practice, the colonies rebelled. Interesting enough, the first act, the Sugar Act of 1764, actually cut the already existing tax from 6 cents to 3 cents, but British decided to actually enforce it. So this resulted on being a loss of power to the colonial courts, since the British courts decided to take the smuggling matters into their own hands. But what really kicked the colonists into gear was the Stamp Act of 1765. Excuse me, sorry. This act put a regulation where all printed goods and documents required a stamp that came with a cost. You might be thinking, hey, sending a letter to to my dear Aunt Sally couldn't be that much trouble. But the common people weren't the ones that were affected by it. It was jobs such as newspaper printers and lawyers that were really affected. I've got to go.
Hi, I'm John Submarine, and I'll be taking over for John Ween, who's taking over for John Spleen. Later that year, the Stamp Act Congress was developed, and this led to a boycott of British goods. This is the first real meeting of the colonies that came together for a common cause and was later used in the Revolution. This Congress also talked about the exploitment of the infringement of their natural rights by the mother country. Another form of the colonies cooperating together was the Sons of Liberty. They were more on the sides of violent protest in conjunction with boycotts that actually worked out for the best. The British Parliament repealed the Stamp Act, but this just led to the passing of the declaratory acts. This act was basically Britain putting on the pants of the house and saying, look, I'm the parent here. You can't tell me what I can and cannot do. I'll tax you when I feel like. Then the British enforced the Townshend Acts that imposed yet another tax that resulted in yet another boycott. This time the Daughters of Liberty got involved by making clothes for the colonists instead of buying from the British. Unfortunately, some of the protests got out of hand. What Mr. Brumbaugh calls the deadliest snowball fight in history, also known as the Boston Massacre, is a prime example of stepping over the line. Roll film.
Boo, Redcoat, you suck.
What you say? That you only meant well, 'cause you did. What you say? That it's all for the best, 'cause it is. What you say? That it's just what we need. You decided this. What you say? What did she say?
Okay, well, that's not exactly how it happened. 5 colonists were killed from British fire, and 9 British soldiers were tried and convicted. Oh, okay. Check that. Only 2 soldiers were convicted. Wait, what? So moving on, the boycotts. I need to take a break.
Hi, I'm John Bean, and I'm taking over for John Submarine, who's taking over for John Ween, who's taking over for John Spleen. So moving on here, the boycotts and protests were very effective stopping the taxes that the British were imposing on the Americans, and in 1773 they spilt the tea by imposing the Tea Act. Just like the earlier acts, it wasn't the taxes themselves that made the colonists mad. It was the way of thinking that the British could tax such a universal product like tea. So if they could tax tea, they could tax anything they want. So in December of 1773, the Sons of Liberty dressed up as Native Americans and threw $4 million worth of tea into the harbor. Now the colonists think that this would dampen the force of Great Britain on them, but Great Britain responded with, you guessed it, more acts. These acts included the Massachusetts Government Act that put a restraint on self-governance, the Quartering Act that made colonists house the British soldiers when ordered to, the Quebec Act that extended the boundary of Quebec and allowed Catholics religious freedom, which was also bad timing with the Great Awakening. The colonial response to these acts were very extreme. Massachusetts passed a statement stating for the colonists to disregard the Intolerable Acts, stop paying taxes, and prepare for war. What resulted out of this was the First Continental Congress. It was in charge of supervising the boycott and sparked manufacturing in the colonies. This marked an important time in history where it could be considered America's first form of government. They even sent the olive branch petition, to King George III himself, asking for peace and to be recognized individually. When he shrugged off this petition, it infuriated the colonists. Oh, George, if only you knew. This rage and form of unity displayed was later used to lead the colonists to victory in the Battle for Revolution. And now it's time. And now it's. Throw me this. I gotta go.
Woo! And I'm back from that bathroom break. That took longer than expected. Did someone say it's time for the secret quote? Oh, I guess it is. So you guys know the rules. I have to guess who says the secret quote, and if I get it wrong, I get snapped. That's right, I said snapped. As to the justice of proceeding in the manner we have done, it must depend on the necessity of such a mode of conduct. If the British Parliament are claiming and exercising an unjust authority, we are in the right by opposing it by every necessary means. If remonstrances and petitions have been heretofore found been ineffectual, and we have no reasonable grounds to expect the contrary at present, it is prudent and justifiable to try other methods, and these can only be restrictions on trade. Okay, so it was obviously in revolutionary times, and it kind of does have like a feminine word choice touch to it, and must have been a war hero at some point, so thinking it's Anne Hutchinson. It's not? Who was it then? Alexander Hamilton? A loyalist and patriot debate? This is so not epic. Well, I guess it's time for me to get snapped.
John? Mr.
John?
Spleen.
Mr. Spleen.
John!
Not
Mr.
him.
Spleen.
Mr. Spleen.
Where did he go? Where's Mr. Spleen?
Mr. Spleen?
Mr. Spleen.
Go.
Hi, I'm John Time Machine, and today we are going to be talking about So, just starting things off here, Britain and the... Oh, yeah. I think that makes it even better, honestly. Having consequences. This Treaty of Paris allowed, crap. Starting off here, that the Britain and the colonies may have won the 7 Years' War. Don't laugh while I'm doing this. You can go whenever you're ready.
Okay. Now, taxes weren't a new idea to the colonists. No. Now, taxes weren't a new idea to the... I looked! Idea to the colonists, however...
Oh, stop walking.
Shoot!
No, listen. She's... That one.
These new taxes were to pay back war debt. The colonists had been used to. Okay, this one I got. Those taxes were to pay back. Nope. As in documents required a.
Later that year, the step. Okay, I need a second. Back up. Later that year. I'm gonna just look at the camera. Okay. Revolution. This committee also.
Oh,
You're good.
And would later be used in the revolution.
This Congress also exploited the
I'm sorry! Goods. This is the first real meaty. I said meaty. Go on! The Stamp Act Congress.
Oh crap.
It said the Olive Branch petition to King George III himself. Hi, I'm John Bean, and I'm taking.
Olive!
Get out.
You're gonna love it.